Good morning, everybody. Could fellow presenters turn on their cameras, please, so we can see your faces? That would be lovely. Welcome, one and all, on this beautiful morning for our import-export webinar. This, I believe, is the last in the series that Hounslow Chamber has been putting on with the help of Hounslow Council. But we will be doing more webinars in the future, so please do read the emails that I send out and look at our website. Today, we're talking about import-export. So in preparation for the meeting, I Googled how to set up, and how to start an import-export business, and this is what I found. So basically, there are 8 bullet points, I think, if I can count right. First of all, select your business name and set up a website and a blog. Without a website or blog, you can't have a networked import-export business. The next thing is pick a product to import or export. Then find the right market, source a supplier, price the product, find customers, transport your products, provide great global customer service. Okay, to me, this sounds like a nightmare. And that is 8 points, isn't it? So I'm so pleased that this morning we've got 2 people with us who've actually done this and have much advice to share with you about the pitfalls and the good bits. So first up is Alan Rides. Alan is our MD. He's ex-DIT. He's lived in so many different countries, half of them I haven't even heard of. Geography and maths not being my strong point, obviously. And what he doesn't know about exporting is not worth knowing. So, Alan, over to you. And I think you're going to screen share as well, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Thank you very much,
Okay.
Sally. What a warm welcome on such a nice day. And please judge us on your 8 pints. I mean, 8 points. I must admit, I couldn't help but look over Paul's shoulder, not so much at the horses, but at the map. It's a very interesting way of looking at the world. Whenever we in the UK see maps, it's always got the UK as the centre, with Europe and Africa underneath. You've got India and China as the centre of the world, which is a very interesting. Oh, and there's Africa. Look at that, proving. Oh my word!
I'm loving this. I'm having a geography lesson.
So Paul's not going to get lost in his own world. Okay, I'm going to screen share a second here and go into a little bit of a presentation that I've put together. Today's webinar is about trade, importing and exporting. And I'm going to try and talk through some of the key points about understanding e-commerce and exporting, growing your sales into the EU, USA or rest of the world markets, understanding market selection, visiting a country, whether you set up via an agent, dealer or sell directly, and what your payment options can be. And then I'm hotly followed by our exporter of the year, Mr. Paul Denny from SKS Tools. Who am I, first of all? I'm an award-winning export professional. I won the Queen's Award for exporting to lots of different countries in the Middle East. And I'm proud to work with Sally as Managing Director of our lovely Chamber of Commerce for West London and Hounslow. I'm also a council member of the British Exporters Association, and I'm an ex-DIT government trade officer. I said back in December about the UK-EU trade deal, watch out for issues regarding fish. Watch out for issues on the Northern Ireland Protocol. Watch out for data. Beware of a blame culture, four storms, peace and frequency, compromise. Watch out for the politics and the rhetoric. It's all beginning to come true. So here we are, we're post-Brexit, we're into being an independent nation, and we've got to work our way through some uneasy, choppy waters. The first subject I said I'd talk about is e-commerce. E-commerce is, in short, selling small volumes of goods overseas. And the key issue that people are going to come up against that they didn't ever used to come up against is supplying product into the EU, where now you'll have to pay VAT and you'll have to pay import duty, which are all at different rates in different countries across the whole of the EU. So where are you supplying to? And the key thing you need to understand when you're supplying is whether you're supplying on a delivered duty paid or DDP basis, in which case your client's going to order your product, which he sees as advertised on your website for £10, and that's the price he pays. If you're selling on a delivered at point or DAP basis, your price on your website will be, let's say, £10, but then your customer will have to pay for the export documentation. Sometimes that's £25 as added by the freight company. They'll have to pay the import duty bill. Maybe that's £10. They'll have to pay the VAT for that country. That's 20%, but it varies. And they may have to have any other charges that are added to it. So the total cost that the client buys your product for may be very different to what's advertised on your website. And your issue is when the goods arrive with your client, he's got a 14-day money-back guarantee. When he starts to receive the bills from the freight company, the VAT office, the import duty, and the documentation charge, he might decide to reject your goods and send them all back to you because your prices aren't clear as to how much you pay. We can help you get through those. Please get in touch with us. To understand a bit more about importing, now that we're out of the EU, you need to have a look on the UK Global Tariff Programme. All goods that are imported into the EU, into the UK and the EU have an import duty level. Goods that are imported into the UK are using this tariff. There's links on the page that I've got for understanding the general scheme preferences, which show if we've got a trade agreement with a country, and also if there's any relief or tariff suspension, for example, if your goods are used in a environmentally green situation. These tariffs started on the 1st of January 2021 this year. And if you need any guidance on finding out what your import duties are for any goods that you bring in, click on this link. You can also get help from customs with working out what the tariff number or commodity code is for your goods, again, by clicking on this link. So now you know what the import duty is for goods coming into the UK. There are also similar pages for the EU. What you have to be careful of is if you import your goods from, for example, China, you're then going to pay import duty and sell them and pay VAT and sell them in the UK. Once upon a time when the UK was part of the EU, you could then dispatch them to anybody in the EU under goods in free circulation. Now, if you import your goods from China, you pay your import duty into the UK, you pay your VAT into the UK. If you then want to export them to anybody in the EU, you'll then get charged by the European Union import duty into the EU and also VAT into the EU. So you'll end up having to pay VAT and import duty twice. This is what the UK free ports system is all about. Once you bring your goods in from China, they come into a free port. You then don't have to import them all the way into being airside, landside, if you like, in airport terminology. You could then export them from the free port into Europe without paying import duty and VAT twice. So, how did we get into this situation with the EU? A little bit of history. The first European free trade zone was 43 years AD, and Scotland opted out on that occasion. It was called the Roman Empire. And across the whole of the EU, there was a free trade zone and everything that was the Roman Empire. And they built Hadrian's Wall for Scotland to opt out. The next big UK trade agreement was 1215. That was the Magna Carta, where duties were agreed to be charged on fixed measures of goods. One of the fixed measures was a pint of beer, so that you knew exactly how much duty you're going to pay to the government. The third point I've got on here is that the first UK-sponsored overseas trade mission was in 1540. And yes, Paul and I were not on that trade mission. Those trade missions were chartered by Queen Elizabeth for people like Sir Walter Raleigh to go overseas to South America and steal Spanish gold. And in those days, the British government paid all of your costs to go on the trade mission. But when you came back, they wanted 50% of your profits. So be grateful that they're not taking 50% of your profits anymore. Why have we ended up leaving the common market? There was a difference between what the common market was in 1973 when we joined and what the European Union was in 2017. So that's our history lesson on where we've got to today. Now it's time to look for some new export markets outside the EU. So key things that we're going to talk through with Paul to understand a bit more about how SKS have chosen their overseas markets is we need to look at the risk of the market of doing business there. We need to look at the payment risk and the country risk. And then you need to look at the size of the market. How big a volume are you going to have? And what profitability you're going to have in that country. Is it a very competitive market? A good example is the United States, perhaps one of the most competitive markets in the world. It gives you huge risk, huge volume, little risk, but your profitability is going to be incredibly low. So do you want to find any higher risk markets where your volume is going to be lower and perhaps in proportion to the size of your company, but where your potential profitability is going to be much higher? So how do we find those markets? We do, as a Chamber of Commerce, country-focused conferences here, and we have country sector trade missions that come into the UK to visit us. We also have a free export plan piece of software that you can access on our website, which takes you to that following link. And you can see what the import duties for each market are, what the payment options are for each market, etc. So the next thing you need to look at is, where does the UK have trade agreements? It's in the news today that we are signing a trade agreement with Australia. That will mean that there won't be any import duty on goods coming in or going to Australia. Much better to export your goods to a country where there's no import duty than to export them to somewhere where you have to pay 50, 60, 70% import duty to protect local manufactured goods. Again, you can see on the link on the bottom which countries around the world the UK's got trade agreements with. So, Sally, do you recognise anybody in that picture?
I so do. How old were you?
So, there's a picture of me a few years ago on an overseas trade mission, where we had a trade exhibition, and that was the stand that I'd set up. And we took lots of brochures and posters with us, covered the stand with the posters and brochures, and people came along, visited us, and were very interested in what we did. You can then follow up these exhibitions. It's a great way of going to a place, going to a capital city of an overseas country, having lots of people come along and visit you, meeting people for the first time. You can then work out whether you want to sell directly to people in those countries or whether you want to employ an agent in that country who you'll give a percentage of your sales and they'll help get you sales leads. Or whether you want to have a distributor in the country and they'll buy the goods off you, import them, stock them, and then distribute them internally in that country. Or as your business grows, you could even set up a local office, all of which I've done. So please come along and see us, and we'll happily give you more advice on what you can do and walk you through developing an export plan. The next question is, Sally, do you recognise anyone in that picture? This was on a visit that I made to Ghana, and I found that a lot of UK banks wouldn't do business with Ghanaian banks. So I went to Ghana and I visited one of their biggest banks, Stanbic Bank, that South African owns, and they've got a local branch in London. So Ghanaian payments could easily come through. But you need to work out what your payment risk is going to be and what your payment terms are going to be and which country you're going to do business with will change. The bottom point that I've put on there is, can UK export finance help? And do you know about Jeff? Now, if Paul doesn't know about Jeff, I'm going to urge him to find out, because it's a new product for this year that's called the General Export Finance Provider. And it's a way how UK Export Finance can give an exporter a contract globally for all markets that they export to for 1 year. And it can help ensure their payments so that they don't have payment risks. But it also has a small hang up where it has issues with some countries where UK Export Finance doesn't give cover. And if you belong to a lobbying group like the UK Exporters Association, the British Exporters Association, then you can help to lobby UKEF to get cover on those. It's a government organisation that helps exporters. So the next question is, what do you sell? You need to have the right finance in place for the right product. And if you're selling one of these, you don't want to be the man walking around underneath it. And these are some of the things that my company outside the chamber sells. They're called single point mooring buoys. You also need to be careful about who you go overseas and meet. Here's not a very good picture, but a picture of myself taking the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, Kwasi Kwarteng, off to North Africa to meet the president of that country with their foreign minister and my local trade partner. You need to understand the culture overseas. Sally, I'm the one with the camera in this picture, and they discovered it was my birthday. So they all brought along some birthday cake and some milk, and everybody came along from the site we were working on and wanted to say happy birthday to me.
So so what is that on the flatbed of the truck?
Yes.
Oh, brilliant.
So it is quite incredible how people come along to want to sort of befriend you as you travel overseas in different countries. Also, trade missions can help. That's the British ambassador in the middle, and this is a group of trade missioners that came over. Sally, you're not going to like this comment very much. I met the man with the sweatiest armpits in this.
Oh, gross.
But I think you can see him.
Oh, God, yes. Oh, that is grotesque. I'm counting up the women. There's only 2 women.
Yes. So the woman on the left of the picture
Yeah.
worked for Department of International Trade in the embassy over there.
Okay.
And these are the same group that came over to the UK afterwards. And this is a mission reception for us, headed by Lord Lamont, who's the trade, the Prime Minister's trade envoy for that country. Where they came to visit us in the Department of International Trade's headquarters.
The man with the armpit problem seems a little bit calmer, doesn't he?
Yes, I got him to put a jacket on in that picture.
Gosh. Okay.
And you can see us on the bottom left-hand side, where I took them off up to an exhibition in the UK and showed them some of the different machinery that the UK has to offer. And also on the bottom right, I took them along to the Trade Association for Mining in the UK, and also to Northern Ireland to visit some manufacturers there. Oh.
Okay.
Oh, that was my last picture. It's only 20 past 10. I've gone through rather quickly.
No worries. That's fine. That's good.
So that gives you a bit of a story through my own experience of where you can start off, where you can travel to a market first, where you can bring people from there back to the UK to visit you, where you can build long-term friendships and long-term relationships internationally, are all about how trade is successful. In the UK, people can do business with e-commerce quite quickly and easily. But when you're doing business in a lot of further afield countries, it's all about relationships and trust. And you've got tools to overcome trust, but ultimately, if people are doing business with you, they do business with people that they know and trust. And getting out there and meeting people and building those relationships, especially when it's your birthday when you're overseas and people want to put together something to say thank you, builds a lot more of a relationship. There aren't any pictures of me on camels, I'm afraid. But I'm going to hand over now to Paul to talk a little bit about how his business, his family business, has grown from just selling products in, if I've got this right, Sussex, Kent, and Surrey.
That's correct, Alan. Yeah.
Okay, so Paul, would you like to talk about how your business started to grow from being just based in Surrey, Sussex, and Kent into exporting to quite a lot of interesting pictures in countries in those pictures?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you a history of SKS and its journey, how we started and how it's evolved on the exporting side. Firstly, I'd like to say good morning, everyone, from the Hounslow Borough of Smallfield. Now, I'm honoured to be asked to make this presentation, my first one, so please bear with me if I start umming and erring. When Alan asked me to do this, I was a bit shocked and warned him that I'm not the best of speakers, but here goes. So SKS and its exporting journey. Perhaps if I start by explaining how SKS came into being. We initially established in 1963 under the name of SKS Tool Supplies Limited as an engineering distributor to service the manufacturing base of Surrey, Kent and Sussex, hence the name SKS. It was set up by my parents, Pam and Paul. Paul came back from Southeast Asia after the Second World War and worked as an engineer at Croydon Airport. Being a people's person with an outgoing personality, he moved into sales for a major engineering distributor. And after many years and much lobbying by some of his loyal customers, he and Pam set up the company. 12 years later, in 1975, due to the regional downturn in manufacturing, Paul decided to set up SKS Plant and Equipment Limited for the exporting 100% activities of SKS. Initially, we were selling to UK export houses, such as the Crown Agents, Brown Brothers, UBM, and Carl and F Company in London, etc., to name a few. With this initial break into exporting through export houses, communication and regular visits were easy and payments secure, whilst being able to export to many Commonwealth and former Empire countries in Africa, Asia, without the additional cost and risk associated with direct exporting. Keen with an enthusiastic drive to grow the export business, Paul, my father, ventured on to trade missions with the Engineering Industries Association, known as the EIA, based in Dartmouth Street, London, to various countries, including Rhodesia, Venezuela, and was successful in negotiating numerous contracts with local trading and oil sector companies, while still maintaining a close relationship with the Crown Agents, who had become our biggest customer. In 1981, after much harassment by me, I joined the company as export packer, delivery and forklift truck driver, whilst attending college for 5 years on a day release to study engineering. In 1983, I moved into the sales side of the business, and at the age of 19 was sent on my first trade mission with the EIA to Saudi Arabia. This was a 2-week mission covering Jeddah, Riyadh and Daman. It was fascinating and yet humiliating and demoralizing trip, as the mission members, local companies and senior members of SKS staff felt that I was too young to be taken seriously, which resulted in zero success. Saudi is a market which takes time and follow-up trips to start to gain credibility and trust, and as I learnt the hard way, an experienced sales team. However, in 1984, I was told that I would be joining another trade mission with the EIA to Iran. Several weeks before the trip, a briefing meeting was held at their offices near Green Park in London, where all the mission delegates were briefed by the mission leader, who in this instance was the Director General, Colonel Bill Williams. A tall ex-Special Forces soldier, he took no prisoners and immediately explained the mission program and risks associated with visiting a country that was at that time halfway through a 10-year war with Iraq. I came back from the briefing and told my father that Colonel Bill was a complete head case for taking a trade mission into a war zone, and that I was not going. My father took my place, had one of the most successful business trips at that time, securing over £1 million worth of business with the National Oil Company of Iran, NIOC, in a single trade mission. That trade mission cemented our future business relationship with Iran, and although we suffered with many payment difficulties, we continued to trade with Iran until sanctions in 2008. 1985, and my father says that he's sending me to Iraq. Iraq, question mark. They are at war with Iran. Off I go up to London for the briefing, and guess who's leading the trade mission to Iraq? Good old Colonel Bill. Having been told by my father that Bill was actually a very good man, knew his stuff, and that the British government would not sponsor a trade mission if they thought there was any risk, I went. Based in Baghdad, we were contacted by a local company, the Danube Bureau, who acted as our unofficial agent. Under Iraqi law at that time, agents were illegal and punishment was severe. But with his local knowledge and experience, I was taken discreetly to all the various companies and ministries in Baghdad, where I was able to introduce our company. It took around 8 to 12 months before we started to receive inquiries and build a customer base. Very different to my experience in Saudi Arabia at that time. I spent the next 5 years traveling to Iraq with the EIA and became very good friends with Colonel Bill. He would arrange meetings with an oil company in Kirkuk and would organise a minibus to leave Baghdad at sunrise and return before sunset so as to avoid any attack at nightfall from local tribesmen. Bill always brought several cases of beer for the 6-hour journey back to calm the nerves. We also visited the Southern Oil Company in Basra and flew down from Baghdad on Iraqi Airways. We supplied many maintenance workshop equipment projects to the oil companies and were even awarded a contract for 10,000 railway shunters hand lamps, which were manufactured by a UK company called Hetherington's in Birmingham, each individual piece being handmade by true craftsmen. Getting paid was challenging. Small contracts under say 5,000 were cash against documents, whilst larger orders were LC at site, with bigger contracts on an LC deferred for 2 years. So basically you didn't get paid for 2 years, even longer in our experience at that time. ECGD, the government's Exports Credit Guarantees Department, Alan, you will remember this because you're older than me, would not cover either Iraq or Iran. So the risk was all ours. We got paid for most of the business. During the trade missions to Iraq, we also went on to neighbouring countries, Jordan and Kuwait, where we established further business contacts and a customer base with companies such as the Kuwait Oil Company, KOC, Kuwait National Petroleum Company, KMPC, and the Jordanian Ministry of Education, where we were supplying equipment for the vocational training sector. In 1990, Bill asked if I would lead the mission to Iraq as he was unable to attend. So in March of that year, at the age of 26, I led my first trade mission to Iraq and Kuwait. There were eight of us, all experienced engineers and salespeople, but I had 5 years of regular visits and experience in Iraq, so I felt confident all would be good. By this time, Iraq was on its 10th year at war and the country was in a bad way. We flew down to Basra, met with the Southern Oil Company and a local power station. However, during our visit, the airport suffered a missile attack from Iran and all flights were cancelled. We decided to take a train from Basra back to Baghdad, which took 16 to 18 hours due to its overflowing capacity of wounded soldiers returning from the front line. Bill always had a saying when he took a trade mission, which was, I got 10 people out there and I got 10 people back. On my return, he called me to thank me for a successful trade mission, for which I replied, I got 8 people out there and I only got 7 people back. Don't worry about number 7, he said. He lost his nerve on the second day and got the next available flight home. During 1989-1990, we were awarded a large contract for the state enterprise, from the state enterprise for electrical industries in Waziria. We were on the second shipment with the third shipment in process when Iraq invaded Kuwait in August 1990. Immediately and without any thought for the many UK companies committed to contracts in the region, the Thatcher government placed a complete trade embargo on Iraq. This caused immense issues for us and many other companies in the UK, and the eventual loss of a large sum of unpaid letter of credit documentation. The EIA and many other associations, as well as myself, wrote to the government expressing our concerns and requesting immediate support. Was met with absolutely no support. I even have a letter from number 10 basically saying we cannot help. That sadly marked the end of our trading relationship with both Iraq and Kuwait, and severe financial blow to SKS, with which I was held fully accountable for. With Iraq gone, in 1991, I joined Bill for an EIA trade mission to Iran. I had recently established a new agent in Tehran, and I spent the next 16 years visiting, both on my own and with the occasional trade mission. I grew the market with the oil and petrochemical sector, visiting and being awarded contracts in Tabriz, Kangan, Isfahan, Azalua, Shiraz, Bandar Abbas, and Kermanshah. Payment was mostly secured by an LC, And in some instances, they would only issue providing we accepted deferred payment ranging from 1 to 3 years. However, there were Iranian advising banks in London at that time which were willing to discount the LC after presentation of documents for a fee which would range from 12 to 30%. The key was to build in the fee at quotation stage, which was a difficult task to predict, crystal ball gazing. During 2006, I'm pleased to say we were awarded our largest project ever to supply the complete maintenance workshop facility for Iran's newest and largest petrochemical plant in Al-Zaleway, total value 1.8 million. But in 2008, history repeated itself again, with America imposing their trade embargo with Iran on UK banks and therefore forcing us to stop trading. Luckily for us, the contract had been completed and payments were received in full, but we had an outstanding performance bond in place. NatWest, our bank at the time, advised that unless we got the client to return the bond, they would pay the amount, 10% of contract value, to our client and close the bond. We contacted our client, ASPC, who fully understand the political situation and immediately returned the bond to our bank, hence relieving us of any liability. That's thank you for a very helpful and understanding client in Iran. Unfortunately, since 2008, we have not been able to do any business with Iran, but continue to be optimistic for the future and still have regular contact with our local agent there. Going back to Saudi, in 1997, 14 years after my first failed trip to the region, we had our first big breakthrough when we were awarded a contract for 950,000 to supply a complete new maintenance workshop facility for the Ibn Rushd PTA and aromatics plant in Yanbu, the part of the Arabian Industrial Fibers set up. Upon receiving the letter of intent, I booked myself on the next available flight to Jeddah, connecting to Yanbu, met with the site manager at site to reassure him of SKS's commitment to the project, and with a few weeks of my return, the contract was officially awarded. The business in Saudi continued to slowly develop, and I'm pleased to say that we are still successfully trading in Saudi through our local partners based in Al-Khobar. Last month shipped our 6th workshop project out to the kingdom. Negotiation is key in Saudi, as we've learned from experience, and they are extremely smart and shrewd in this respect. Expect to build in 5% not to be paid at the end of the payment phase. Treat it as discount, we've been told. I'm very proud to say that our biggest and longest market that we have and still deal with to this day is Libya. I love Libya. There's something about it and its people that fascinates me. Their resilience and determination in the face of absolute adversity is incredible. And through all their hardship, we have never failed to have not been paid by any contract. Going back to 1982, a Libyan procurement office was set up in Cavendish Square in London to procure materials for the national oil companies in Libya. A buyer from Crown Agents recently moved jobs and contacted us to see if we would be interested in registering as a supplier. We jumped at the opportunity and started receiving inquiries and some purchase orders. Our relationship with them grew and flourished until the closure around, I think, 2003. Payments were secured through London and shipments to one of their 2 freight forwarders in Essex. So it was very easy and good business. Concerned about the loss of the business due to the closure of Juabi Oil, I quickly joined the first available trade mission with the Middle East Association and continued with regular trips until the revolution in 2011. We established relationships directly with all the subsidiary oil companies of the National Oil Corporation in Libya. We have continued to do business during the most recent challenging times, and pleased to say that circumstances are now looking more positive for the future. Malaysia. In 1995, we received a fax inquiry from a local trading company in Malaysia who had found our details from the local Chamber of Commerce, requesting a quotation for a milling machine. We quoted and they issued a purchase order the same year. I thought, if we can receive a purchase order from a country we have never visited, then there must be potential for more business. With that in mind, I booked on a trade mission to Malaysia and Singapore with the Northern Development Company in January 1996. This was before KLCC and the Petronas Twin Towers were built. Comprising of a majority of Geordies, I was the odd one out, but they soon made me feel one of the gang. With the help of the British Embassy, I received a comprehensive list of local trading and engineering companies, as well as making contact with the company who originally contacted us, but was informed that they had now signed an exclusive agreement with the UK competitor. Business developed, albeit at a slow pace. Undeterred, I was convinced that there was potential in the market, and I continued to make regular visits, making countless telephone calls and arranging meetings and cold calls without any success. In 1998, after several previous trips, I decided that this was my last attempt to break into the market. The same scenario of cold calling, etc., led to a dead end until one call I arranged to meet a local precision engineering distributor. We talked over lunch and he immediately got what we did. And although he wasn't interested, he knew of a company that might be interested. With that, I met with a company called Kotijaya Didactic, who were tendering for large-scale government vocational training projects. And they would confirm they were interested in what we did. We then spent the next several months quoting them, and in 1999/2000, we were awarded numerous contracts throughout the next several years as part of their major award at that time. From this breakthrough, our name gradually got known and grew to other organizations within Malaysia, and we were able to slowly build our customer base, which continues today. Other countries visited and business concluded are an armed police escorted MEA trade mission to the Yemen. I won't go into too much detail on that one. Vocational training sector projects were part of our reason for that visit, and many follow-up visits by myself. MEA trade mission to the Sudan to re-establish previous business with Sudanese railways. We've been to Venezuela, Chile, Kenya, Uganda, Ghana, Egypt, Azerbaijan, Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, Myanmar, Oman, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Japan, and South Korea. We've held numerous exhibitions over the years in Rhodesia, Indonesia, and Malaysia, which brings many potential clients to one location, while being able to display and explain our projects and services. We've got previous extensive visits for supply chain purposes, traveling to China, various regions in China. I'd like to point out that all the trade missions by the EIA were government sponsored, which helped immensely small companies in particular cover the costs associated with visiting the markets mentioned in a very cost-effective way. Our journey continues, and I'd like to thank Alan, Sally, and Lisa for their continued support. Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed, Paul. Wow, that's what an interesting life you're leading. By comparison, I'm feeling a bit woo. I live in West London. I have a question. There's been much talk about trade missions. But bearing in mind COVID, are they still? I mean, obviously there must have been, they will have stopped. but will they be resurrected? And is it for? I mean, you're selling huge bits of kit, Paul. So there's obviously quite a nice, they're big contracts. What about? I'm just thinking. One of my export clients used to make olive oil, and I know she went on a few trade missions. Is it worth it for the smaller company? How
Yes,
much do you have
absolutely,
to pay?
absolutely. Yeah, I think it's the best way to enter a new market. You'll meet people on the trade mission delegates that may have more experience, less experience, but that network of people, the British Embassy's support in market and their contacts and what they can offer smaller companies is a good advantage, I think. I think Alan would agree with that. So yeah, but at the moment, I don't, obviously, because of the current situation, I don't think there are trade missions out there.
There
Alan would
aren't
know
any
more.
trade missions at the moment, but I know that. So there are some major issues. The Department for International Trade in the London area has now got a 60% budget cut imposed on it by the government. So there's going to be quite a big shake-up coming. There are private sector trade mission companies. One of them, who is currently run by the former head of the Middle East Association, Michael Thomas, who does very good trade missions that Paul and I have both been on. Our local little chamber itself may start to do trade missions in groups to some countries. Although I must say, your story, Paul, it is utterly mesmerizing. Some of the stories that you've told in that are utterly revealing. I couldn't help but keep looking at Sally's face as you went through some of your stories. I've never seen Sally have so much fun on a webinar listening to what's being told about somebody's stories about what they've been to. I share entirely with you the issues between Iran and Iraq and some of the Middle East countries that we've both been to. I've personally been taken off by military convoys to be told that a colonel at a location in the desert somewhere in a tent wants to see you, and off we've gone. And then you sort of come back afterwards, and that they tell you very revealing stories about how they're currently a colonel in the army, but when the war's finished, they want to go back to what they were doing before, and your product fits directly into their industry. So he's very interested in buying the product. And thanks very much for your brochures. As soon as this is finished, I'll be in touch with you. I often wonder what happened to these brochures that you hand out to people, where they disappear to, what sort of filing cabinets they're stuck in. But it's really interesting. The pictures that I showed of the trade missions that I talked about were also for Iran, and the pictures that I showed was the former or the current British ambassador to Iran and some of his staff inside the British embassy in Tehran. And it's a really interesting way of, absolutely as Paul said, of building trust with these people. You've got to have that trust, otherwise they won't do business with you. And if you've taken the time to go out to their country, to meet them, to spend a bit of quality time with them, that trust can be built. And the best way of doing that is to go on things like trade missions, because you get introduced to people at British embassies, which is a really good place to be introduced to somebody you're going to do business with in the future, rather than meet somebody in a smelly back alley office somewhere that you've never been to. There's a certain credibility that you've got if you've been put in that podium. And I loved your comments as well about trade finance and working out which banks were right for which countries. It rang so true with my picture of the Stanbic Bank in Ghana, your issues with banks with Iran, and how only London Iranian banks would deal with their payments. But you have to know what the costs are right from the beginning, so that you can build those costs on to the price that you're going to sell your product for. Otherwise, you'll sell your product what you think is going to be for £100, and then you find out that the bank wants to take 30% to give you payment. Well,
Absolutely.
what you want to do is to be selling your product for £130, so that you've still got your £30 to give away to the bank and get all the money that you want when you sell it. And that comes back to the point that I was making now about trade with the EU is all about understanding in e-commerce what your delivered duty paid price is. You need to know what the import duty is going to be. You need to know what the documentation charge is going to be. Some people call it the Brexit cost for doing your export documentations for those markets. You need to know what the VAT charge is going to be. And if you add up all of those together, you're likely going to come to 30% as well. So you just really need to know what the hidden costs are for each market you're going to do business in, not just what the superficial, the top line costs are going to be that you can easily see. You know what you buy your product for, you know what you sell your product for. It's what you sell your product plus what the local market costs are going to be. So tell me, Paul, here's a good question for you.
Oh, God.
You gave us a really good example of how you received something called a fax.
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, can you explain to people what a fax is? Okay. But secondly, and more importantly, it's a really important point that you've made, how you decided to change from being a reactionary market. In other words, you receive a fax from Malaysia and then you supply your goods and you get you paid, and you're just reacting to inquiries coming from the market. At what point do you change that round from being reactionary to being proactive and going to the market and deciding, I'm going to expand into that market? If that market's coming to me, I'm going to go there and try and expand my business. How do you make that decision?
Oh, thanks for that.
Facts question is the easiest one, by the way.
Okay, okay, I'll explain the facts. That's an easier one. Fax was communication before email.
Right.
There you are. It was a fax machine you had in the office. Prior to fax machine,
There were telexes.
Exactly, Sally.
I remember cutting a telex. It was a nightmare.
One of these,
Yeah.
is it?
Yeah, we had a room for a telex machine.
Yes.
Yeah, it was all little perforations of paper.
And it was a nightmare.
Yeah.
And then, awful.
And then the fax machine was invented, and we thought, wow, this is brilliant. And you literally pieces of paper through a machine, and it got to the other end, unless the line got cut. And if you're on page 39 of 50, the line broke, and you had to start all over again. And the telephone bill for sending faxes to Iran was horrendous. Yeah, but as I say, we received a fax inquiry from Malaysia from a company that had found our company details from their local chamber in Malaysia. We quoted it and they placed the order, and I thought, there must be business. If they will place an order for a milling machine, we don't know them, they don't know us, but they've just placed the order. So based on previous experience and what have you with other markets, I made the decision, I'll jump on a trade mission. I looked for one, found one, Northern Development Company, and I'll go out there. And it was government sponsored, so part of the cost was covered. I'll go out there and see what's going on.
But surely, I mean, from a business point of view, I mean, you obviously were doing quite well, so you've got to have the resources, i.e., you've got to have the time, so you can go off on a trade mission.
Exactly, you've got to have, you've got to have people back in the office to back you up, etc. Yeah, we had the resources to go out there. But we didn't get breakthrough for about 2 or 3 years. I just kept going back, partly because it's a lovely country to visit as well. Yeah, I got to see most of Malaysia, Sabah, Sarawak, Langkawi, Penang Island. But the Malaysians make you feel so welcome. Over here, we take a client out to lunch. Over there, our client takes us out to lunch. Because you're in their country, you are their guest, and they are so friendly and warm. They make you feel welcome. They make you want to go back. And although Malaysian business, especially government-based business, is very closed door, it's very hard. The embassy struggled to find companies that were working on these major government projects at the time. Malaysia had a Vision 2020, which was to be fully industrialized country by 2020. At that time, it was 1996. So they were, busy growing the country. They wanted vocational training throughout the country. They wanted training centres in the jungle. I visited training centres in the jungle. Beautiful, brand new, state-of-the-art buildings with precision engineering workshops to train people on. But to get that contact, I was lucky. My last trip, I'd made it my last trip because, as you mentioned, resources. We just thought we can't keep spending money on a market that's not working. So that was my last trip, and I met with a company that said, I know a company that's doing the project work, and that was it. It took off from there, and then we slowly opened the door from that to build. But it wasn't easy, to be honest. But you just have to go with your gut. I went with my gut instinct that I just felt we could do business here. I wanted to do business there. And eventually, you just don't give up. If that's what you want to do, just don't give up. Just keep trying.
Thank you so much indeed, Paul. There's some lovely comments from Joyce Ong in our chat box, which is lovely. She's mentioning basically avoid Singapore. I've only been to Singapore Airport as a stopover to Australia, and all I can say is the orchids in Singapore Airport were wonderful. And also you could have a shower, which was really quite nice. Right, my husband, as you know, I'm working from home. My husband has a quick question. It's quite basic, but yeah. So basically he's saying, because he hears what's going on in the background, so he's given me his written question. I've heard that exporting to different countries in the EU now involves different paperwork for each country. So yes, a quick lowdown on that, Alan. If you're exporting something to France, exporting something to Germany, is it different paperwork for each?
Right. In short, the European Union, we used to be part of it. When somebody was exporting from the United States to sell into the UK or into the EU, we were part of it. This is the documentation that they used to have to do that we now have to do instead,
Okay.
or as well as. The documentation consists of a customs form, an invoice, and a packing list. Largely, that's all the same thing. But your invoice and your export documentation needs to show what the goods are, what the tariff number is, etc. So it's not really all different documentation. It is similar, and I'm going to be very clever at the end of this, and I'm going to screen share, if this is big enough for people, our export documentation price list for 2021.
Okay.
And it shows the price list for doing, you've got the member prices for our certificates of origin. If you export goods from the UK that are made in China, for example, you'll need a certificate of origin showing that the goods are Chinese. So you will need that. If your goods are made in the UK, you won't necessarily need that because your UK goods don't attract any import duty going into Europe, because we have a trade agreement with Europe, the Chinese don't. So it depends on the origin of your goods. Then you've got different prices on here for UK EUR preference certificate, and it gives a preference for import duty, usually to zero rate your goods, for qualifying goods which are shipped to countries that have signed a trade agreement with the United Kingdom. So that's all about if your goods are UK made. So this is the document, this is the customs document that you need to complete. If you export goods to the Arab world, you need an Arab certificate of origin, which we can do. And those countries include all of the lovely countries Paul's mentioned, from Algeria to Yemen and everything in between. That covers most of the alphabet. We've got also certificates need a certification of the signature, which we can certify. Also, there's an admin fee for taking your documents off to embassies, whether your documents need to have a Foreign and Commonwealth stamp on there, if there's needed by legalization required at the embassy, and a handling fee. So we also do Egyptian documentation for certificates of origin and certification of signatures. And again, there's a full breakdown on here. As well as that, certification and signature on any commercial documents which we can do, including memorandums of understanding, articles of association, certificates of sale. We can do all of those, including price lists. We're fully authorized to do that, and we even offer translation services and carnet schemes. So if there's anything that you need from us, we can help. We even give letter of credit advice service where we can talk through how you can present your documents to your bank, how they can be pre-checked, and advice on letter of credit terms. Please be in touch with us and we can help. I'm going to scroll through all of this so you can see the whole price list. This is all shown on our website, and the ultimate aim is to make your exports plain sailing. There's a nice phrase at the end.
Brilliant. I think that sums it up very well. Thank you so much, because I realise, yeah, we've gone over time a little bit, but it was a really interesting discussion this morning. As ever, I've learned such a lot. So thank you so much, Paul and Alan, for being with us and for your time and sharing your stories. And a bit like Joyce, I'm always going to remember the man with the armpit problem.
There must be a market in Iran for deodorant.
Sure.
Well, there's an opening. Anyway, you know, now made me laugh. Alan, can you take over?
Sure. Okay, so I wanted to thank Hounslow Council as well for sponsoring this webinar, and hugely to thank my friend Paul Denny from SKS Tools, the best workshop tools in the UK. If anybody wants to buy them, please visit Paul's website and go and get your export documentation from us. Sally's now finished coughing and spluttering, so he's going to thank all of us for coming along. And the best host of anybody doing webinars is Sally Smith. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. What a fun morning, and hopefully see you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Cheers. Keep
Bye-bye.
safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.